Awesome, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. You are tuned into Sustainability Week, and I hope you have been adding your comments on our social media platform. Please do continue to hashtag SUSWeek21, that is SUSWeek21, on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And also, please feel free to continue to visit our virtual exhibition. As I did say, you stand a chance to win quite a lot of prizes. We are about to conclude day one, engaging on economic recovery, ESD, and SMMEs. And I think this is a great way to end off day one because most of the panel discussions that have been initiated earlier have focused and looked into issues of SMME. So we have great experts, people who are really leading impeccable industries, and most importantly, they have a lot to share about procurement, supply chain, and how do we manage SMMEs, particularly in the state of our economy. So with me, I have Ms. Catherine Weinberg, who is the CEO of Fatola. We also have Weybrand Hazenvoort, who's the managing partner at Collective Value Creation. We have McKevin Ayaba, who's the CEO at Set Up a Startup. We also have Mr. Wasim Karim, who's the CEO of the National Youth Development Agency. We have Mr. Elias Lavemba, who is the CEO of Siobi. We also have Mr. Stephen Gray, who is the founder of the Maker Space. And last but not least, we have Yanesh Naidu, Director at Digital Strategy, Gender Mark. So they will be joining us. And without further ado and wasting any more time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to then request Mr. Weybrand to introduce himself, the organization's sentiments on the topic, and he will then be followed by Ms. Catherine Weinberg, and we'll have Steve after that. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So Collective Value Creation assists large international companies to develop their small businesses or develop suppliers to the company in the space of ESG. So we're really targeting areas around anti-corruption, anti-modern slavery, corporate governance or small business governance, for lack of a better word at the moment, and environmental management, POPI Act. So really to help these companies to do business with large international organizations. Organizations have been under increased pressure with what is coming in around the area of sustainability and compliance. And that's really what we assist these companies to do. So I'm looking forward to this panel and to hear what the other participants have to say.
Hey, thank you very much for that. We look forward to engaging further. Catherine?
Yes, hi there, Tabang. Lovely to meet you. Lovely to join here. So Catherine Weinberg, I'm the CEO of the company Fatola. And basically, it's really simple. We're here to build businesses that last. So we're absolutely passionate about making sure that we underpin the economy by building small businesses that really have a long trajectory. I think what's so interesting about this whole pandemic is that it really forces us to think differently. And so one of the areas that we find very exciting, referring to sustainability, is looking to help businesses move into the circular economy. And we have some very exciting initiatives in that area. So really finding opportunities, not only in the corporate supply chain, because after all, the corporate supply chain only is a small portion of our economy. But yeah, so what we're really doing is we particularly focus in the rural and township areas, identifying entrepreneurs that have got good ideas that can build a business that can still be in business in 10 years' time.
Absolutely interesting. I like the last part. I think it also is a point that deserves to be engaged, making sure that businesses last even after 10 years, particularly SMMEs. So I look forward to asking you some questions around that, Catherine. Thank you. Can we have Mr. Gray? Steve?
Yeah. How's it going? Yeah, so this is our very fantastic lab. I'm with Fiso. He's just gonna quickly show you what he's doing. So the Makerspace is an open source community-based incubator and innovation space. So we encourage people to come in and learn how to use tools and technologies. And obviously, technologies aren't always high tech. Sometimes technologies could be something as simple as turning plastic waste into jewelry. So one of our incubatees is working on that. And we just try to create a platform where there's access to equipment, access to experts and technology, and access to inspiration as well. And then obviously, as we kind of have matured as an organization, we realized that in order to have an impact, we can't just train people. We need to train people in a way that creates revenue for them. So they need to have a sustainable revenue that comes out of their work, whatever it is they're learning or their skill, whatever it is they're doing. And so we've got a few platforms and projects. The plastic recycling is one of them. We've got some digital manufacturing technologies. So we've built a 3D printer that prints clay. Gendermark they one up on us. They've got a 3D printer that prints metal, but we're doing our best here in Durban. And as a non-profit, it's all about people. So for us, it's about people, creativity, and technology, bringing those three things together and trying to find a way to make businesses sustainable, both in terms of their inputs. So we don't want to encourage businesses that are going to not be circular. We want to specifically encourage circular design and circular consumption. And in terms of the SDGs, looking for responsible production and consumption. And then also sustainable financially as well, of course, because those things are, it's important to have, it's a prerequisite for a healthy economy and a functioning society to have financial stability and sustainability as well.
Okay.
So that's it for now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much there, Stephen. And I think with you conducting the panel discussion at the workshop gives us great appreciation for what you do, because then we see it and then we understand what you mean by people, creativity, and technology. So we look forward to engaging you further on that. Can we have Mr. Karim, and then we'll have Mr. Lavemba afterwards. Wasim, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Thabang, and greetings to everyone. I'm Wasim Karim. I work with the National Youth Development Agency. I think as part of my role, I think we're very passionate about developing young entrepreneurs and finding pathways into economic opportunity for young people. And that can be done through access to funding, access to markets, or access to the kind of skills that young people need to be able to start and scale their own enterprises. We support the presidency in the Economic Recovery and Reconstruction Plan, and there's quite a considerable amount of work around that, particularly around supporting formal and informal enterprises in the economic recovery to make sure that they're not left behind in this process. Yeah. So I think very much my interest is in what I think are the very blurred lines between the informal and the formal sector, and particularly looking, and I think the NYD is very biased towards particularly that niche of young entrepreneurs who are micro enterprises in the township and the rural space. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you so much. Truly, you all are kickstarting. I've got now a lot of questions. So I think our seatbelts will be on in that regard. Thank you, Wasim. Mr. Lavemba? You're muted. I think you're muted.
Yes, that's it.
There we go.
Thank you for the opportunity and for the invite, and for us to be able to speak to SMMEs in the sector. We are the South African Essential Oil Business Incubator. We are having 4 focus areas in our business. The one, we incubate farmers, mostly rural and township farmers in the flavors and fragrance industry. We also have a beauty and personal care program where we assist SMMEs, mostly female, to develop their own cosmetic products that is market ready, also export ready products. We also then have a science program where we train analytical scientists. Here at the back of me are 2 of our youngest scientists, Tumelo and Granny. The one is 24, the other one is 26. They are the first Black analytical scientists this age in the industry for essential oils. So they will analyze essential oils for the industry. Then we have a Science to Learner program. The Science to Learner program is to stimulate the desire and the passion for scientists. We believe at COB everybody can become a scientist only if you allow them the opportunity. And because of the fact that our township and rural schools, our children don't actually stand a chance to become scientists. So our business incubator, we're not just focusing, on training, but active SMME development. We look at enterprise. When we look at in our supply chain development, we develop the people within the value chain and take that from there in order to make sure that our industry grow. And ma'am, I must say that we are focused on a transformed industry, and we are not mincing our words when it comes to transformation within the flavors and fragrance industry. And those are our main focuses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lavemba. Once again, also appreciation of the organization, and we're seeing transformation right there at hand.
Yes.
We need to be stocking your eucalyptus oil from you with this COVID. So please, let's make a plan there just to get some boxes of eucalyptus oil and all the lavenders and all those nice things that can.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. We'll engage further shortly. Mr. Naidu, Yanesh?
Yeah, thank you, Tawang. I feel a little intimidated by my fellow panelists. Well done to all of you. What an amazing job. So I am one of the owners of GenderMark. We design and build production lines that assemble automotive components. And we've been fortunate in that we actually export 95% of our production lines all around the world into the US, Germany, China, India. Wherever there's an automotive hub, we've got some production line in that location assembling some kind of component. And being so export focused over the last 10 to 15 years has really brought an insight and given us a different perspective when it comes to Africa and our challenges. And what we quickly learned through our journey, this whole fourth industrial revolution or industry 4.0, whatever you want to call it, has definitely got a Western spin to it. It's trying to solve a bunch of Western problems. And what we quickly realize is that our challenges in Africa are completely different. We have different population growth trajectories. We've got a different skill set. And what we have now become very focused on and really passionate about is using technology to solve African problems the African way, not using Western technology to solve African problems, because it will never work. And what we've been focusing on for the last 3 to 4 years is building solutions and network businesses to support the African challenge, using African technology to solve our own problems. And that's what we're most passionate about, and the way we see the future of our business in the next 10 to 15 years.
Thank you so much there, Naidu. I think we're about to get controversial. I love controversy. As you could see, I'm quite dramatic with the red lipstick and the head. So we're going to talk a lot about that, particularly on the matter of industrialization. And thank you very much for bringing it up, because it is a critical point of departure. We all think, industrialization comes to improve and benefit, and indeed it does. But I think what we fail to explore is the impact of it. And so I think you're helping us balance the equation here. So thank you very much for that. Let's have our last panelist who's going to introduce themselves. Christy, are you here? I did see you logged in, but I don't see you anymore. Okay, Christy might not be here. All right, let me perhaps start with Wasim from the NYDA. You spoke about how the NYDA aims to, create pathways of economic opportunity, particularly, identifying the blurred lines between the informal and the formal. What do we mean by that, and what are these blurred lines?
Yeah, I think Tabang, maybe to start with a bit of context in the discussion, is that we have to recognize that South Africa's economy structurally is very different to any global economy, in that whereas in most global economies you find a fairly fair split between small business and big business, South Africa's economy is overwhelmingly dominated by big business. There's no other lie than the myth that small businesses create the most jobs in South Africa, because they don't. While small businesses account for 99% of formally registered firms, they only account for about 20 to 30% of the actual jobs in the economy. And this comes from a historical perspective, it comes from a policy perspective. The domination of big business shines through everywhere in South Africa. Now, breaking down those barriers is not necessarily something which can be done incrementally. It does require some sort of policy overhaul if you're going to really transform the landscape of small businesses in South Africa. But I think the one aspect that we've been focused on is this sort of transition of young people in being able to pursue self-employment opportunities where they exist, and how you can support the transition of young people in those opportunities. Now, if you look at the way stats, say, for example, measures formal and informal. An informal business is somebody who's classified, probably on the stats definition, as somebody who's not registered for VAT, might or might not have a bank account, probably doesn't contribute to UIF. So our definition is very compliance focused when we classify it between informal and formal. Whereas, and I don't think we've come up with necessarily the factors that influence the success or failure of informal enterprise. So we believe there is value in targeting the informal sector, because that is where the margins of economic activity happen, particularly for young people. And supporting that grouping with access to market opportunities, access to funding opportunities that allows them to scale their business enterprises is a real opportunity if we target that sector for employment growth in the country. I think we also need to realize at the conclusion that the multitudes of unemployed that we have in South Africa, the ability, whether through economic growth or public employment opportunities, there is insufficient space to create the number of jobs that we need to. And therefore, self-employment, particularly at a micro and an informal level, is very critical for us to be able to achieve that. And I mean, just one example of how the NYDA is doing that is that we've heavily shifted away from a loan-based policy into a more grant-based policy, but one that can operate at scale to match that passion and tenacity of young people with the skills and financial resources that they need to be able to thrive in those kind of enterprises.
Thank you for that. I think perhaps, Catherine, if you can just build up on what Wasim has shared there. Particularly, I appreciated the statement that brought some form of reality for us, that indeed we're saying SMMEs, are responsible for employing, large amount of workforce, for employability and so forth. But the reality is that's not what is happening. So then, Catherine, how do we ensure that SMMEs or businesses are more inculcated into the circular economy? How do we involve?
Thanks, Tabang. So thanks, Wasim. I think that's. I just want to pick up on your point. I have to say don't agree with your figure of only 23% of jobs coming from small business. I mean, TIPS report in 2019 says that it's 55%. So I'm not sure where the data, discrepancy is. But I do think, just pointing, I think without a doubt, we have this massive unemployment gap. And maybe before I get into some of the mechanisms to solve this, I think it's important for everybody to really lift their heads up and actually have a look at that. Because I think what tends to happen in this sector is we're great at patting ourselves on the back. Well done, Fatola does a really good job. Well done, Basim, you're doing a good job. Well done, Vibrant, you're doing a good job. And there are little pockets of excellence that we're creating around the country, and we like to speak about them. But in actual fact, if you step back and you look at what's happening in the country, it's a monumental failure. We're actually failing in this sector totally and utterly. Because if you just look at the official number of unemployed, officially, the 8 million unemployed, if we were to solve just that number, we would have to create 22,000 new jobs every day for 364 days. That's 3 new Vodacoms every day, or 2,200 entrepreneur businesses employing 10 people, or 22,000 individual micro enterprises. And I think what's so important about a platform like this is that we stop talking about the little things that we're doing, which are great, but they're not going to be game changers. And we really need to speak about game changing opportunities. And how on something like this, just to say, okay, I'm doing great work. I know I'm really proud of it. We do really good stuff. Steve does great stuff. Vibrant does great stuff. But actually, how do we come together and create 100 times more? Actually, it's 100,000 times better than what we're doing. 10x is no good. 10x doesn't even touch sides in South Africa. We need 100x, 1000x. And for me, what's interesting is how we're going to do that. And so one of the answers that I believe is really critical, first of all, it's admit that we're failing. And we actually have to do that. We have to challenge ourselves that what we're doing is not good enough. No matter how we want to say it to our clients and say how amazing we are. Actually, as a country, we're totally failing. So the first thing is let's admit that we're failing.
Yeah.
And then secondly, let's look about how can we change this. And for me, the way that we change is instead of talking about my business and your little section and what you're doing for youth, it's about saying, how do we work as a pipeline? So how do we actually look together, work as a pipeline, and look at the best of breed along this pipeline and create a journey? So create a journey for entrepreneurs. What Wasim does is great, but it's a tiny drop in the ocean. What Vibrant does is great, but it's at the other end. So how do we join these pipelines? And the starting point for this is we need to get out of our ego of saying, I'm amazing and this is my territory and that's your territory. And we need to start finding ways to collaborate, because it's only through collaboration when we open ourselves to learning from each other, learning from international best practice, and finding better ways to build platforms for scale, helping Steve. Steve does great work. How do we then build a platform that helps his guys move on? And really, yeah, we've got to do something different. The same old is going to get us the same old results.
Yeah, no, thank you, Catherine. If I was drunk on whiskey, I'd be sober immediately, just from the statement that you made, because you're right. You're right. Something is wrong. And the results that we are seeing today statistically, unfortunately, are not assisting us with catching the ego, like you're saying. So something's got to change. Maybe, Steve, you can come in.
Sorry, Tabang, just before you go on, one of the things that we initiated 4 years ago was the South African, the Business Day Supply Development Awards. And specifically what we looked at there is to say, let's speak to corporate South Africa, because they're great ones for setting up territories. And let's help them to say that if they're going to really change something, they need to start working together. And so initiatives like that, where you bring people in to work together and you find ways to collaborate, is absolutely the way that we've got to go, not only at corporate level, but at ESD level, at providers level, and even at the same time, getting entrepreneurs to find ways to collaborate. Because collaboration, if there's one name for the post-pandemic world, it's about collaboration.
Absolutely. And I then believe that having incubators is the interface. So maybe, Stephen, can you come in there on that point, just extending on what Ms. Weinberg has said, the issue of collaboration, and also, do you think the sector is failing? Are we failing?
Yeah, we are. We are. The unemployment rate is off the chart. We in terms of the measures for global for economies, for countries that are not functional, an unemployment rate of above 20% is basically a recipe for civil war, basically. So we are very much teetering on a very dangerous territory. We saw that recently with kind of unrest and riots. So I think very good points, and I think the answer has to do with collaboration, definitely. And then also we've got to look at technology as a lever. Technology has always been a way to scale and to leverage what we can do. So I believe the answers are going to be found with micro enterprises, with self-employment, as Wasim was saying, and through connecting micro enterprises to a global economy. So providing services that are digital to a large degree, and leveraging. Before COVID, 4 hours the flavor of the day. Everyone was fourth industrial revolution was what was hot. But really, what we're talking about is a set of operating principles or way to make services to create value that is now accessible. That's what the 4R is. It's an accessibility. It's a leap forward in terms of what's possible for individuals to do and participate in. So I think a version of incubation that scales with collaboration. I think those corporates and people who've got access to the market really do need to look at ways to share that to the micro enterprises and the self-employed individuals. And I think also looking past just local supply and looking at global market, which is huge. So we don't have enough markets to employ everyone right now. If all those people were employed, there's not enough transaction, there's not enough economic activity to support those 8 million positions. And so I think collaboration and a pipeline that basically ends an international platform. And then how do we use technology to scale what we're doing? Like you said, we can train 10 people here. That's not going to change. That's not going to change anything. It's going to create stories. It's going to create a methodology. It's going to create learnings that we can share and scale. But it takes a long time. So how do we use technology to scale what we're doing? And I think I'd probably invite Janesh to add his 2 cents, because I know they're sort of a global entity and they really do leverage technology for what they do. But obviously they're going to think bigger than just manufacturing and think of how do you solve unemployment with technology. So I don't know if you want to hand over to Janesh and see if he's got some insights.
I think, Stephen, you've made my job exceedingly easy. Thank you so much. Can more of you do that? I'll just relax a little bit. I'm so tired. Yanesh, indeed, Steve has been a psychic. I was thinking you should be the next one. Definitely to then add, you mentioned a point that said industrialization is trying to solve, or is being used as a tool to solve Western problems in Africa. So what do you mean by that? And what African tools can we use to solve our own problems? So what are the interventions that your organization is doing to then solve African problems?
So I think, to Steve's point, I think the only solution we've got to scale, as Catherine mentioned, our problem is massive, is digital. And I will kind of explain my statement using an example of Uber. So Uber is not the perfect business, for sure. It's got its problems. But Uber's created 13,000 jobs in South Africa in the last 6 years. That's more than most organizations. And they did that while fighting the government and every single union that was against them, yet they created the 13,000 jobs. And the crazy part about Uber is that the guys that founded Uber don't even know PE where I live, yet they're the biggest taxi company in PE, and they don't own the asset. And this is this idea of building a network business with this notion of what they call shared value. So it's about building a digital ecosystem, or let's call it a collaboration system, where we all take a piece of the pie. The previous notion was that I want to own the whole pie myself. Whereas what Uber offers is a way to digitally collaborate between a driver and a rider on a platform that everyone takes a cut and everyone becomes sustainable. And like I say, Uber is not without its problems, but that's an example of a digital business. And the opportunity for Africa is that we've got youth in huge numbers. And if we can network them and connect them together to solve a particular problem, let's say distributed washing powder manufacturing. I met a guy in the Free State that's making washing powder in his shack in the Free State on his own. If we could build a simple machine, call it 25,000 Rand, that can secure his washing powder making process with some scales, put him onto a network, so Uberize the washing powder manufacturing, scale that to every single township. We've now got a digital township economy that's all connected. They can leverage the big volumes and buy raw material together. So it's a completely different paradigm shift. I don't think you can take an existing third industrial revolution business that's manufacturing in the conventional way or running a taxi business in a conventional way and transform them into this connected business. You've got to completely separate the two things out and think afresh. And it starts at the business model layer, and about connecting and collaborating. And the only option is to do it digitally. I think what I did disagree with Catherine about is the forums where people talk and they showboat and say how great they are. I agree with that, but I don't think that often leads to anything beyond the talking. I think you have to be able to create a system where everyone in the value chain can make money, then everyone's going to do it. People are not going to do it sustainably if they're not making money out of it.
Sure. Vibrant, I think you can come in here, particularly, you are in the space of value creation. Perhaps you can then tell us that how can we improve the value chains of SMMEs? How can we get them more involved? Or maybe you can even extend on what Mr. Naidu has just shared.
Wow, Thabang, it's such amazing conversation here. And I think, Catherine has really also given some real insight into that massive problem that we are all experiencing, right? I guess a question here to everybody is, what is the problem? Is the problem job creation, or is that the symptom that we are seeing?
Yeah.
Now, what really is some of the problems that we are experiencing? And it's interesting that if you talk to any one of us, we would all probably say that we are to some degree at the end of the pipeline, right? If we look at, what's sitting in the area of youth unemployment, one of the serious areas there is education, right? And Wasim can tell you probably that at any given time, the resources that he is further developing is highly dependent on what he receives from the education department. And I think so it is with all of us. We are working in a pipeline, as Steve has rightly pointed out. I would like to throw something out there, and I would like to ask, what is the impact of corruption currently on that pipeline? And I would like to say that that's probably one of the biggest area that contributes to variation in terms of what we see around scalability. We can talk about scalability, but if our variation is high, we really can't scale, right? So we've got a significant area around the area of corruption in South Africa. And what we try and do is help these small businesses to understand how to protect themselves from the space of corruption. Now, it's interesting, we don't like to talk about corruption because it's that drum that we've all beat to death, right? In terms of talking about it. But if we look at the impact on all of the sustainable development goals, corruption through the bank has got the biggest impact on all those SDGs. I'd like to ask maybe to the forum the question of, if we do not impact on corruption, what will be the impact on further economic development or job creation in the country?
Sure. Vibrant, absolutely. I think we're definitely going to engage on that just after Mr. Lavemba has added his sentiments, and it's open to anybody. I see that Catherine might need to go. Can I just ask Mr. Lavemba just to add his sentiments, and then I'll have you, Catherine. Maybe you can answer the question that Vibrant has posed to us, and then after that we can continue and then close, because I know we are all tight for time. Lavemba, just maybe you can extend on what Vibrant has said, and also Yanesh, particularly on the issue of value chain and ownership. How do we own the means of production? Your sector, the net asset value is about $250 billion. That's the value of the beauty and the skin industry, but we don't see a lot of ownership. So how can we ensure that issue of ownership is well positioned, particularly with our SMMEs or entrepreneurs?
Great, thanks, Thabang. I think what we have learned from COVID destroyed a lot of talkers, a lot of committees, a lot of discussions, because where we're sitting now, we are facing with real issues, with unemployment rates that is skyrocketing. So it also introduced us with opportunities to change the landscape, our vocabulary. In our company, we don't use the word value chain, because when you look at the word value chain, it is links. And if a link is broken, it's a broken link. That thing basically can't be used anymore. We look at a concept called value train development. Value train, when you do that, you first, before you can put a steam locomotive on tracks, you have to build those tracks. And before you can build those tracks, you need conversation with communities. You need conversation across the board. And then the hard work starts. So the planning starts. Where is it that you want to go with this concept that you have? And how far will you want to go locally, continentally, or internationally? So if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So for us to be able to capture industry, every industry in my mind, our industry, so we are not, this is not a talk shop for us. So we laid the tracks. It took us 10 years. We were the laughing stock in our industry because we focused on laying the tracks. And now we are at that stage that we could pop up entrepreneurs anywhere in our value train. Number one is we grow farmers that are growing unique flavors and fragrances in the wellness sector. That is a $4.7 trillion US dollar sector per annum. It took us a couple of years to perfect that model where we can put a farmer into a program for 12 months and he become a professional flavors and fragrance farmer. Then within, as Van Yanesh referred to the value chain, so we realized that our beauty and personal care industry imports flavors or raw materials. We then went to government and said, let's partner and let us develop SMMEs in this sector that use the raw materials from our own farmers. Wow. Then, so we link these SMMEs. This is the third year we're running. So we have 30 SMMEs that are from the beauty and personal care. They use the raw materials from our farmers. So we are not focusing on exporting our raws. The moment you export your raws, you export jobs, you export opportunities. It takes a lot of work to perfect a model like that. Now, somebody needs to test the oils. Who's going to do that? South Africa needs to do that. So we establish our own state-of-the-art essential oils laboratory. And we equip it, not with old scientists, with young scientists in their 20s.
Mr. Lavender, I'm so sorry to kill the flow of your conversation. Just cognizant of time, Catherine has to log off at 15:05 sharp. Do you mind if I just allow her to do her closing remarks, please? And then I know Wasim also has to go at 3:15. So please, I just for them so that, you know, they don't just leave and then we are just heartbroken. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. So please, may I just allow Catherine, and then I'll allow Karim as well. And then Mr. Levenberg, that was a valuable statement you made there. I really want us to build on that.
Thanks, okay. Thanks, Tabang. Yeah, I mean, I think as my closing, I want to say that everybody in this room has huge value. And, you know, we really reaching out and already on the group, on our chat group, it's about let's join hands and let's find ways to work with each other. So I think that's the first takeaway, is that it's exactly guys like you that are A players. We should be joining hands and finding a commonality. If I was able to stay longer, I think maybe it'd be nice to close with that. So what is the commonality that we could bring together where we can actually 100x the impact of the work that we're doing? But what I do want to do is really speak to Vibrant. I mean, I think that it's very easy to get completely swamped by this challenge of corruption. I think it's a killer for all of us. It sucks our energy, and it's not a great thing. The beauty of working in entrepreneurship is that you can work around it. Yes, of course, I agree on small businesses need to understand corruption. They need to understand how to push back on it. They need to understand how hugely devastating it is once you enter onto that slippery slope of corruption. And that's certainly something that we teach all the entrepreneurs that we're working with. So I think it is important to be aware of it. It's important not to be destroyed by it. But the beauty of small business is that you can work around that. So as I said in my opening, it's not all about let's be in a corporate value chain. There's a huge economic activity in South Africa that is business to consumer, small business to small business, and that component of the economy is growing all the time. You talk about localization, but let's talk about local economies, local access to markets, this kind of thriving, market culture. And I think that's something that's building And that's something, again, if you talk about the small guys, the starting up youth guys, it's not that they should start a business with an aspiration to supply to Woolworths. No, it doesn't work like that. That kind of overnight success just happens in the movies. In the reality, guys that start businesses, you start small, selling to granny's friends, selling to your church, selling into the local economy. That's actually how small businesses start. And I think the more that we can understand that and build that, the better. Wasim, I am a great believer in the informal economy. I think it's a mistake for government to really push that for formalization of those guys. I think there's a space for the small guys. There's the lady selling oranges on the corner. I think she should be applauded because that lady has a child that owns the Spaza store who has a child that ends up owning Woolworths. So I think it's about honoring all of the different components in the economy in this journey. And yeah, there's a place for everybody. And let's find ways to allow them all to thrive. But yeah, so for me, Tabang, thank you. I think this has been really exciting. I really look forward to meeting all of you guys. Let's connect and let's 100x, let's 100,000x South Africa and actually really get things cracking. Thanks so much.
1,000x.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Catherine. That was quite valuable. Thank you. Yanesh, I've noted your hand, but Wasim also is on his way out. Can he do his closing remarks? And we go back to Mr. Levenberg. Yes, Wasim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think very much so. It's a really interesting discussion. And you know, I think just to take Benan's point around corruption doesn't only erode sentiment in the country, but it also erodes foreign investor confidence. It puts South Africa on the downside in terms of everything we try and do. So that erosion, it must never be underestimated. You know, I think sometimes we can go along the lines of saying, well, the corruption exists everywhere. You know, until we deal with it decisively, it is a problem. And just to show, I mean, this is not a political discussion per se, but we know the political economy is relevant. Right now, there's a reason you have the lowest unemployment rate in South Africa and the Western Cape, and it's tied to governance in the country, where you have better public spaces, better public facilities, transformed public spaces, that ultimately creates spaces for people to thrive, whether it be in entrepreneurship or in employment. Yeah? And part of my concluding remarks is, what can we do going forward to be able to solve and nurture this conversation so that we actually have something impactful? As you go into local government elections, one has to think about the role that public spaces and public facilities play, and the public good, for that matter, plays in the development of entrepreneurs and the support of small businesses. Where you have massive potholes that lead into a township, you are eroding the ability of small businesses in that township to be able to succeed. Yeah, and I think that is a critical development. Infrastructure is not the only solution, but it is an important solution if we want small business owners to thrive in this country. The other potential game changer that I think is possible for South Africa is widespread connectivity rollout, particularly for young people. I mean, a lot of the conversation today has focused on a global supply chain. Already, there's young South Africans who are selling their graphical content to a global market. There's young people participating in global business services, yeah? And taking last mile connectivity at affordable rates into marginalized and rural areas has the potential to unlock massive growth for this country. If there's one thing we can point to and focus on, yeah, that could be that game changer that was spoken about today, that is a massive potential. Government's already trying to roll out a plan as part of the stimulus. I think we're funding last mile connectivity for 200,000 households. My interest is how you make that 2 million households, and the potential for growth that can unlock. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Karima. I think those are great thoughts and sentiments that will help us conclude these discussions. So we're going to debate in your absence. We might mention your name, so check the record later. Or your name might be spoken about, but no, on a serious note, thank you so much for your time. And we are very mindful of the great work that the NYDA has done and the work that still needs to be done by the NYDA. So we definitely will be in touch. Don't leave that chat group now when Catherine says we must collaborate. So we're expecting you to lead that collaboration and engagement regarding that, Mr. Karim. So thank you so much also for your time, and we truly appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. Lavemba, I think we're going to go back to you because you mentioned, on the point where I was like, yeah, this is what it is, particularly on the point of export. When you export raw materials, you export the skill that is accompanied with it. I think that was a great point, and I never thought of it in that regard. Please expand as we interrupted you.
Thanks, Babang. I want South Africa to listen, and when I walk away from here, if they forget anything I say, I need everybody to first to envision that if you lay down train tracks, it's hard work. It's night and day. But if you have done that, you build your stations in every area where you want people to be serviced from your train. And then from there, you put your tracks or your train on the tracks. And those ones, I refer to my SMMEs. I refer to my value chains. I refer to everybody that link into that whole value train concept. So when you look at, the beauty and personal care industry forms part of the wellness economy, which the wellness economy is $4.7 trillion US. At the BPC, or beauty and personal care, that's about 1 trillion. It's almost 3 or 4 times the GDP of South Africa alone, only the beauty and personal care globally. We do not have enough people yet in that industry. We are not saying that we're going to solve that problem, but we want to know that commitment and consistency is what's going to change the future of our South Africans. Number one is, once you start doing and you have about 40 or 50, it will grow to 100 SMMEs in that sector that will start using more raw materials from our farmers. And Yanesh said that we must own the value chain. So we say we are no more presenting, we are demonstrating how you own a value chain in an industry. When you come to our business, you will find that we are planting, we are extracting, we are testing, we are formulating, and then we are selling. Then we take and we duplicate it in SMMEs. They are planting, they are extracting, they are formulating, and they are selling. And we keep that going year after year, and we're growing small margins, but the growth is there. Eventually, we'll get to a place where we don't have to import raw materials anymore. We only export our raw materials, growing our economy. And that is how we see that we will be able to recover. We are not taking jobs away from anyone in our industry. So our business incubator is what we call an economically viable incubator. Every job we create is a brand new job. We don't turn a job from another industry. When we put people into our incubator, it's brand new jobs that we'll create. Eventually, Tabang, when you look, there's some sectors that we have not touched yet, like your fertilizer sector, yes. Which is a subsector in agricultural. But if I have enough farmers, I can call on 3, 4 young black youngsters that have studied and qualified, and we can train them how to create fertilizer. We buy from them. And that is how we think, when we want to recover, we must not come with quick fixes. We have to sit back, we have to plan and have a 400-year plan. South Africa, it's sickening to see that you sit down and there's a 5-year plan. Then there's a 10-year plan. You can't have a 20-year plan. You have plans that go beyond you, 400 years, 500-year plan, so that when the next generation comes, they don't start over. Every time there's a new administration coming, we are starting over, and then we cannot get to that place where we really can say that our industry is making, or different industries are making an impact. So from my side, that is, I would like to give my other panel members also an opportunity. So I challenge South Africans, let's move away from old concepts like just a normal value chain. Let's move away from duplicating, start innovating. Thank you.
Absolutely. Let me take the opportunity just to read some of the questions and comments on the virtual chat, so that we can afford an opportunity for you as our remaining panelists just to answer. I am cognizant of time because we were supposed to be done. However, you were made aware that our panels were overlapping, so I'm cognizant of that. We'll wrap up in the next 10 to 15 minutes. But we have here Adele who says, well said, Ms. Weinberg, together we are stronger. Siwelile then says, growing the manufacturing sector and ensuring that South Africa increases exports to the rest of Africa she's probably saying, or he's probably saying, that that is critical. Inter-Africa trade is also important. The idea of small business has been oversold. Businesses must be encouraged to scale, and more South African businesses must be dominated, or must be dominant rather, in the rest of Africa and beyond. Perhaps, do you want to add on that, Mr. Naidu? What do you think of that particular comment?
Yeah, I would agree with the scale comment. I want to make a comment on the corruption. I call it excuse, but before I comment on that, I just want to talk about what Ellis was talking about. So you can imagine what Ellis is doing is creating these pockets of excellence in a particular space.
Right.
And I think he's doing a phenomenal job. It's really amazing, and congratulations to all that you've achieved, and I wish you more. And my comment earlier was, how do we support Ellis in digitizing that business? So digitizing those pockets of excellence so that he can scale it to multiple places. And then we build the other side of the marketplace. Like Uber is a two-sided marketplace. We have drivers and we have people that want to go somewhere. So Ellis is creating the one side of the marketplace, the supply of a particular product, and he's managing the quality and creating opportunities and jobs in that space. Where we need to support him is the selling side. How do we create a brand, a marketplace that allows him, through his small SMMEs that he's creating, to sell his product globally? It's $1 trillion industry, and that's what we should be focusing on, is digitizing Ellis's business and his small SMMEs into a network, so we Uberize the fragrance industry and we become the brand around the world that if you want the fragrance, you got to buy it from South Africa. That's the one comment about how you scale these pockets of excellences by digitizing. And to the comment about corruption, not to minimize the impact of corruption. It has a maximum impact, but I often find that it's an excuse that we all hide behind. It's a reason why we're not doing things, is because of corruption. And my experience, working globally across the world, in the Western world, and in developing countries, corruption is everywhere. It's just hidden differently. The 2008 financial crisis was all around corruption. It was a corrupt cartel that created this 2008 financial crash. That's the fact. It was corruption. And I think the biggest impact we have, the biggest challenge we have in South Africa is not corruption, it's incompetence. And our always hiding behind reasons why we can't do things. We've lost our get up and do it attitude, despite what the challenges we have. And I think it's the incompetence of basic service delivery like water and electricity that has a far bigger impact than the sort of large scale corruption that we see, which has an impact, of course. But I think we tend to give ourselves grace for not succeeding and blame it on corruption. Just my comment on corruption, and again, not to minimize what the impact of corruption, but we should be succeeding despite the corruption, is what I'm trying to say. And other people have done that. Ellis is a good example.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just jumping in because
dip in the ocean. Go ahead, Mr. Gray.
You want us to engage without having the air traffic controller there. Let the conversation flow. Like, I think some of the points we've picked up, and getting back to Catherine's point, what are we actually going to do about it? So after this conversation, we'll go back to doing our work and grinding it out and making that 10% difference. So I'm excited to start strategizing around the future and what we could actually do. So Ellis made a point. He's frustrated with, I don't know if it was Wasim, about a 4-year plan. And looking at the Chinese government and their sort of success story into the sort of global economic power that they've become, current economic ways aside, they work on a 50-year plan, And that's very helpful. So one of the things we have is too many plans and not enough execution in South Africa. We've got the best constitution, but we don't know how to enforce it. So I think waiting for someone to save us is another problem. I think that the quickest impact is in small business and micro business because it takes no time to get started. And getting back to the point that Ganesh and myself really do believe in, that technology is the secret weapon we can leverage. So how do we work together, put all our effort in one place where we start to build this technology that can scale and scale to a global economy? And I think for me, that if I dream about the way that South Africa get out of the current state they're in within the next 10 years, it would have to be through mass rollout of access to data and computing. So it would be digital, it would be leveraging digital technology. And then it would have to be this collaboration that Catherine started talking about, Dinesh talked about, Elis talked about with the trains. It's very difficult to do this on your own. And so every person working on their own, one of the big fallouts of apartheid was that we had to isolate from the rest of the world, and we had to become self-sufficient. And as South Africans, we're great. We have a Heritage Day, Brian. We like to hang out with each other. But when it comes to real collaboration, everybody's sort of a little bit suspicious of each other. Like, are you going to steal my lunch? And I think if you look at success stories, if you take the biggest sort of startup success ecosystem in the world being the Silicon Valley, it's all about collaboration. Nobody's trying to stop each other and thinking that if that person succeeds, it's gonna steal clients from me. And we've got that very small, isolated mindset still. 25 years after apartheid, we still think the world's only as small as this, and if someone succeeds, that's less money for us. So if we could build a global a pathway to a global market, that you become the Uber or the eBay or the whatever platform of choice to an international market, then it doesn't just have to be for fragrances in the beauty industry. It doesn't just have to be for digital services. It doesn't just have to be for one particular vertical. Is there a way that through collaborating, the whole idea of the sum of the parts being greater, that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts? And so that's kind of where we come from as a small, I call us a micro incubator. We've got a few people, we're trying to help them as a nonprofit struggling. We need access to the market. We need our incubatees to have a place to plug their products into and not to have to go and do all that hard work from scratch every time. And so if anyone else is sort of achieving success in some of those areas, how do we work together? Like, how do we actually bring it all together and not just, get onto the next call in 5 minutes and, get back to work and forget that we're all doing the same thing and we're repeating this thing over and over and over. How do we kind of combine our efforts? And that's a question I'm actually asking us as panelists. Do you guys have ideas? Do you have success stories where collaboration actually is working, or how we can switch from being so individually focused to doing something collaborative and collective?
Okay. So Brent, do you want to just extend on that particularly?
Yeah, I love that point that Steve has raised around collaboration. And I've thought about this a lot of times from when Michael Porter coined the terminology around shared value creation about 9 or 10 years ago, right? It's an interesting point because a lot of companies take the shared value bandwagon to create value for themselves and then say that they share that with others. My perception is that Steve is onto something. We need to move the needle from shared value creation, and I guess that's why we called our company what it's called, to collective value creation. And collective value creation really means, up to Yanes's point, that everybody needs to pull up their sleeves and together start creating value. And the value creation needs to be distributed more equally. Right? We're looking at companies that really focus on shared value creation, and the maximizing of shareholder profitability is obscene in comparison to the employees in the company that really aren't actually making it. Right? I mean, that's, I guess, one of the other areas why we so strongly are focusing on the area around anti-modern slavery and minimum wages, right? Where we really believe we actually need to have a greater equality across the board, and specifically so around that value creation process. And there's beautiful case studies out there around the collective value creation process, right? Where companies have actually said, we need to together start thinking about innovation and value creation. I'd like to come back to my point though. The problem that we're sitting with is not jobs. The problem is innovation, and agreed with Janes's point around capabilities and increasing about skills. That's really areas that we need to focus on. But all of this, and I'd like to maintain my point, all of this is undermined hugely by the area of corruption. Sadly, a lot of us have the perspective that corruption is something related to a large company. The average SME that we talk to says, don't talk to us, don't train us on corruption, we're not the ones that corrupt. And then we start talking to them and we start realizing there's a real perspective problem around the area of corruption. It's the thoughts around it's this company or that large company that does corruption. But we need to start saying to ourselves, what have I done not to not be corrupt, but to be anti-corrupt? But that's where we need to start moving towards.
Okay, November?
Thanks, Chair. I want to touch on what Steve started discussing on, how are we going to collaborate? Chair, I usually, when I do development or training or talking to SMMEs, or even the ones that we work with, and I will tell them that when China comes to South Africa, they come as a nation to compete against SMMEs in our country. Our SMMEs, it's one or two that go out into the rest of the world, and they try to compete. You can't compete against Silicon Valley. They have collaborated and they make sure that they own huge share of that economy that they are in, or that sector. So for us here in South Africa, and I think we must not talk about the collaboration. We need to come back next year to this summit and show that we have collaborated to some extent. And we have to share how our collaboration has changed at the bottom line in our books, how our collaboration has advanced us, to move products quicker from the shelf or export those products, how our collaboration has stimulated growth in numbers, employment, and all the good things that we so hope for. So when nations come and compete with us, that we can at least be much more successful. I think that is why SMMEs are failing. One moment is a great idea. They go to an international platform and they come back, completely blue-eyed with nothing in their hands. And some of them give up because they realize that the global space is not for the faint-hearted. You can't do it on your own. And I think that is where we need a vibrant. And I think when we look at another word maybe for you would be a strength-based approach. Let's look at our strengths. All of us here has strengths, and when we approach it that way, we could then be able to make sure that we build that train, that we lay down that track, and we can collaborate with Janesh as a multi-pronged approach. I mean, he's a specialist in what he's doing. If it works for the agricultural sector, why not? Yes, if he makes some good value from it, we are South African first before we are individuals. And I think that is one thing that we need to get. I just wanted to input that there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. And I think just going back to Weybrand, we'll be doing our closing remarks right in this moment. But I think you're very right. We should not undermine the concept that you have just spoken about, corruption, because the truth of the matter is, as SMMEs, there are SMMEs who have to pay for opportunities, unfortunately. For you to get a deal at times, there's somebody you need to know inside, or there's somebody that you need to pay off, and so forth. And it's become so inculcated in the system that people have been discouraged from business. So I think you're right. There's a balance between Vanesh's comment and also what Stephen has shared as well. But it's also something that is like a spanner in the works. You know that mosquito that bites you, né? The mosquito is gone, but it's bitten you. And you still have to scratch. It's a very irritating thing, as small as it is, but it has its impact. It leaves a mark on you, right? So with that, can I have your closing remarks? We'll start with Weybrand and then everybody else. And we'll see how we take this offline and make it tangible and formalize it into something concrete. Weybrand, over to you.
Thank you, Tabang. Thank you so much. And such stunning conversation from all the panelists. And I really applaud everybody in terms of the work that we're doing together as well, I think, in this space, right? We all are in it for South Africa. I think for me, it's really important that we roll up our sleeves and get busy with the stuff that we need to in terms of changing mindsets in this country. And one of those mindsets is around actually working around capabilities. Right? One of the other mindsets really that we need to start saying is, how do we start building an ethical ecosystems everywhere? And absolutely, to Yanes's point around digitalization of that. Yes, we need to start thinking around how do we digitalize that? But we need to start thinking from an ethical ecosystem point of view, how will we change this country? One ecosystem at a time. Right? Because otherwise, what we're going to do is keep undermining our own development. And we must actually say, absolutely, how do we work together around getting those ethical places in place so we can actually create those machinery that starts working on it. But what sadly needs to be considered is we are all about the variation control. And when we start thinking about scalability, we need to start thinking what leads to variation around scale. Brilliant discussion from everybody on this panel around that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate your contribution there. Can we have Ganesh? Then we'll have Stephen, and then we'll conclude with you, Mr. Lavemba.
So thanks. So just a couple of closing comments, and thanks for the fascinating discussion to the other panelists. So to Stephen's question about what do we do now, I believe this comment may sound selfish, but I think that somebody just has to take a step forward and create the platform. I don't believe the reality on the ground is that if we sit and have 100 meetings together talking about how we're going to collaborate, it's not going to actually end up with anything. Somebody has to take a leadership role, put their foot forward, create the Uber, if you want to call it that, and then people, if it works, people will follow. And you have to, I think the ethical side of it is you have to make it on the fair shared value principles that we spoke about earlier. And I think somebody just has to take a step forward. Airbnb didn't wait for somebody, they took a step forward. They didn't need the government to help them with it, they just did it. So I think that's the point. So somebody just has to take the step forward. We're trying to take the step forward. Whether we work or not, we'll see. Hopefully next year I'll be able to answer. With regards to the international market, Ellis, I agree with your point about, the international market is not easy. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there, and you got to have support around you, and you can't do it alone. But I think the golden opportunity for us in the next 25 years, and all developed countries understand this, is sub-Saharan Africa. And we have to take advantage of our know-how. We're in the place. And that is our competitive advantage. And we have to seize that with both hands, because somebody else will seize it if we don't. And I think we need to focus our efforts on exporting into the sub-Saharan Africa. That's where the biggest growth is going to happen in the next 50 years. That's where the biggest opportunity and the biggest need for youth unemployment is. And so we're changing our business model to sell machines, from selling machines into Germany to selling distributed manufacturing into Africa. That's my closing comments. I think the marketplace is on our doorstep.
Thank you so much, Mr. Naidu. Absolutely, we're going to take it forward. We definitely will. And we must have those meetings. But the different thing is they're going to become tangible results. So we'll make sure that things are implemented. But thank you very much and for all that your organization is doing. Let's have Stephen there with the closing remarks.
Yeah, again, thanks for everybody's input and the fact that we're having this conversation and actually putting some time and energy into how do we solve these problems. At least that's a step forward. But I do think we definitely need to leverage each other's networks. We need to find that synergy. We need to find that opportunity where it doesn't cost us any more to work together, but it adds a lot more. I think that you're right, someone does need to take the lead. But if we do it completely isolated on our own, then there's no buy-in. and everybody's got their own thing they're working on, and their own thing's going to be the great. The amount of platforms that people have told me they're starting specifically for startups in Africa to sell online. There's too many, and they're all over the place, and they're replicating all that works out. You almost need a ground zero to work from, where there can be a sort of enough credibility, enough critical mass of people that sort of sign into some sort of commitment to say, you know, we'll be part of this thing. We will support it. If it's your platform, you know, like great, like we'll support it. Like, how do we use your platform to help our people develop? How does Ellis get his people through that platform? Or if it's your platform that's sort of the code base, and we build a functionality, and you create that ability for you to plug in different industries. But again, that know-how and that network effect. So I had a little meeting with my team this week, and I asked them a simple question: what's the biggest sale you could make this week? And what's the amount, and how would you do it? And I had answers from 100 Rand to 5 million Rand or 10 million Rand. And the difference being the network of people that person was connected to. And so that's where, you know, from the 10 million to the 100 million to the billion, you know, there's some of us have those connections, some of us don't. So how do we put those connections all together in one place so that anyone who joins that network can have access to $1 billion market? And then it just becomes about getting good at their craft and delivering that product. So building a business is hard because you've got to design, then you've got to manufacture, and then you've got to distribute. And it's very unlikely you're going to be good at all three. So if you just focus on one, so that's the manufacturing, you just make the product. Someone else has the channel to sell it. You know, they've got the website, and someone else has the design. You know, that's what you need to make. Or you do one of those things. But if we're all doing all three of those things all the time, we're putting so much effort in and not getting a return. So again, I'm going to just I've asked Bev to give us some access to that WhatsApp group, and maybe we can take that over as just a starting point for us to compare notes and to support each other and find the lowest common denominator. You know, what's one thing that we can all agree on? We may not all agree that solving corruption is the single answer, although we all understand it's an important function. But what is the single one thing we can agree on? And then that can be the base point. And, you know, we support each other, of course, but we have one commonality. We're like, yeah, it's got to do with that. We can help with that thing. So one more time, just thanks for everyone's participation. And I do hope we can have some fruits out of this. I hope it's not just about talking. So my challenge to the rest of you guys is to put another hour into this, and you know, just a little bit more time to kind of extend the conversation into the real world.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. Truly, yeah, well noted. And I think you've posed a great challenge that we can take forward and build on. Thank you. Mr. Levenberg?
Thank you, Chair. Coming back to our main topic of you know, recovering, look at enterprise supply chain development and SMME development in this country. You know, firstly, I want to leave the listeners and those that have dialed in my panelists with a few words. Disruptive innovation. Vainan said that we need some innovation. We don't need jobs, we need innovation. So we will need disruptive innovation that will displace your existing industries that have made a lot of money, and force them to innovate further so that you could get some space within that economy. So with disruptive innovation, you create economy alongside an existing economy up until you get to a space where you can interject, and you don't close up that roadway or that economy. You just displace them. And when you with disruptive innovation comes economically viable enterprises. And what we normally mean with that in our organization, what we want the listeners to go through, is that if you develop a business, the business must not take jobs from another business. It must create brand new business. It must be a brand new value add addition to not just one and maybe a multi-prone type of benefit to other industries. So I want to make an example. I think I would rather talk about myself. My management team are all under the age of 35. Robert Malache started as a TUT student. He finished his BTech. He's now doing his master's, and I believe that he will become a PhD within the organization. All my managers are qualified managers. They are young people, but they will not stand aside for local or international counterparts. They are well trained. It took me 10 years to build this model where we would say that we have transformed an industry. We have brought in young people that have the next 30 to 40 years at least, you know, in order for them to be there. Because if we're going to build a 50 or 100-year plan, I needed youngsters. It took us a lot. It kept me with one pair of shoes for the last 10 years that I only wear if I go to a meeting. But I needed to stick to that. And when you look at what we are doing, our agro processors are 3 youngsters, and they are under the age of 30. Our scientists are 3 youngsters, and they are under the age of 30, actually 24, 26, 24, 25, and 26. So when you look at that, we created that economically viable situation where the jobs that we have created are brand new jobs, and now stimulating the agricultural sector by disrupting most of the sectors with new innovations. These guys are amazing. And, you know, we look at something like liquid spice that does not exist anywhere in the world. We develop, repurpose, and reuse existing products within the agricultural sector. So if we need to be able to change and recover, we need to come up with concepts that we can implement. Disruptive innovation is an old age concept. We need to really use that. We need to repurpose, and we need to reuse and recreate and not duplicate what is happening in our industries, but rather, with the last word saying, we need to innovate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Levenberg. And with that, I don't want to waste any more time, but I want to say thank you to all of you for the time that you made to contribute to this critical topic. And indeed, I think we are all challenged to get going, to move, and to really commit to long-term strategies rather urgently. So thank you for your time. And we definitely will be meeting soon. So looking forward to engaging further. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. Ciao. Okay. Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the panel discussion on economic recovery, ESD and SMMEs that you have added thus far. Please feel free to engage further with our panelists. I'm sure you can find them on social media, or you can find their organizations on social media and so forth. You can be in touch with us and we can help you with that. And we have noted your comments. We have noted your questions, and thank you so much. Please let us meet again day 2. Well done for making it through day 1. Absolutely incredible. I hope you have posted some of your questions on SAS Week 21 on social media. That is hashtag. And also you visited our virtual exhibitions. Tomorrow, I'll be seeing you at 9 o'clock pronto. That's when we should be kickstarting our program. We look forward to engaging further. And thank you so much for your time and participation. You are the VIP on this platform. Until then, see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Take care.
It was so beautiful, and there's no